they will take the more difficult route that will jeopardize the standing of the British royal family if they have to do that.
At first, it sounded like a simple royal tribute, a young princess, a family heirloom, and a gesture meant to honor the memory of Diana, Princess of Wales. But according to recent reports and royal commentary, Princess and the Princess Royal may have done something far more significant than place a tiara into a child's future. Because this story is not only about Princess Charlotte, it is about what Diana's name still represents inside the British royal family, nearly 3 decades after her death. It is about the tension between memory and monarchy, between a painful past and a carefully managed future. And if the reports surrounding Princess Anne's alleged decision are accurate, then one quiet gesture may have reopened one of the deepest emotional wounds in the House of Windsor. The claim being discussed is dramatic. Princess Anne is said to have honored Princess Charlotte with a royal tiara connected, symbolically or historically, to Diana's legacy. At the same time, some commentators have suggested that Anne's decision was not merely ceremonial, but pointed, deliberate, and aimed at sending a message inside Buckingham Palace. A message about inheritance, a message about loyalty, and perhaps most importantly, a message about who gets to preserve Diana's place in royal history. Buckingham Palace has not publicly confirmed these claims. There has been no official statement saying that such a ceremony took place, no formal announcement of a new title for Charlotte, and no verified confirmation that Queen Camilla has been isolated from royal duties because of this reported dispute. But the reason the story has captured so much attention is not simply because of the facts that can be checked. It is because of what the story touches emotionally. For many royal watchers, Diana remains more than a former Princess of Wales. She remains a symbol of compassion, vulnerability, public warmth, and the complicated cost of royal duty. Her memory lives not only in documentaries, photographs, and anniversary tributes, but in the faces of her grandchildren, especially the children of Prince William, the Prince of Wales, and Catherine, Princess of Wales. So when Princess Charlotte's name is placed beside Diana's, the public does not hear only a family story. They hear a question about legacy, and that is where Princess Anne's reported role becomes so intriguing. Princess Anne has always occupied a very particular place within the monarchy. She is not known for theatrical gestures. She is not seen as someone who seeks attention or uses symbolism casually. The Princess Royal has built her reputation on discipline, hard work, directness, and loyalty to the institution. She is the king's sister, but she is also one of the most respected working members of the royal family, admired by many for simply getting on with the job. So if Anne is being placed at the center of the story, royal observers naturally ask, why her? Why would the Princess Royal, of all people, become associated with a gesture involving Diana's memory, Princess Charlotte's future, and Queen Camilla's position inside the family? That question matters because Anne's image gives the story weight. A claim involving a more publicly emotional figure might be dismissed as sentiment. A claim involving a controversial outsider might be dismissed as rivalry. But Princess Anne carries a different kind of authority. She represents old-fashioned royal duty. She represents endurance. She represents the kind of Windsor toughness that does not need to announce itself loudly. And that is why the reported tiara moment feels so symbolic. A tiara is never just jewelry inside royal life. It is history made visible. It carries memory, rank, belonging, and permission. When a tiara is worn, displayed, gifted, or withheld, it can suggest far more than personal taste. It can suggest who is being welcomed into a legacy and who is being reminded of boundaries. For Princess Charlotte, the symbolism is even more delicate. She is still a child, protected from most of the public burden that comes with royal life. Yet she is also the daughter of the future king and the granddaughter of the woman many still call the people's princess. Her place in the family is not only personal, it is historical. One day, she may become one of the monarchy's most visible women, standing beside Prince George as he moves toward his own royal destiny. So the idea that Charlotte could be connected to Diana through a tiara immediately becomes powerful. It suggests continuity. It suggests that Diana's warmth has not disappeared from the royal line. It suggests that the next generation may carry something softer and more human into an institution often accused of being too guarded, too silent, and too controlled. But every symbol has more than one meaning. If this gesture was meant as a tribute, why would it reportedly cause tension? Why would Queen Camilla's name appear so strongly in the discussion? And why would some royal commentators frame the alleged moment not as a family celebration, but as the beginning of a deeper internal confrontation? The answer lies in the difficult emotional triangle that has shaped royal history for decades: Diana, Charles, and Camilla. King Charles III has spent much of his reign trying to present a stable, modern monarchy, one that honors the past but does not become trapped inside it. Queen Camilla, after years of public criticism, has worked to establish herself as a steady consort, someone seen by supporters as loyal, patient, and committed to the king. For many people, that chapter has softened with time. But Diana's memory has never fully faded. For some viewers, especially those who lived through the 1980s and 1990s, the emotions remain vivid. They remember the wedding, the separation, the interviews, the headlines, the tragedy, and the public grief that followed. They remember a woman who seemed both royal and deeply human. And because of that, any suggestion that Diana's legacy is being revived inside the palace carries an immediate emotional charge. This is why reports about Princess and allegedly demanding Camilla's isolation feel so explosive, even while remaining unconfirmed. Such a claim raises a far larger question than whether one royal figure disagreed with another. It asks whether the monarchy is still wrestling with the unresolved emotional consequences of its own history. Was this reported gesture about honoring Diana, or was it about challenging Camilla's influence? Was Princess Charlotte being protected as a symbol of continuity, or being placed at the center of a struggle between memory and authority? And if Princess and truly believed Diana's legacy needed defending, what does that suggest about the private concerns still moving beneath the polished surface of royal life? At this stage, the story remains surrounded by uncertainty. There are claims, there is commentary, and there is strong public emotion. But there is also a deeper truth that explains why people keep watching. The British monarchy is never only about what is officially announced. It is also about what symbols appear, what silences linger, and what memories refuse to disappear. And if Princess Anne's reported move was more than a tribute, then the tiara may have been only the first sign of something much larger beginning to unfold. Because once Diana's legacy was placed back at the center of the conversation, the next question became unavoidable: who inside the royal family would welcome that memory, and who would feel threatened by it? And that question is what makes this reported dispute feel larger than a single royal gesture, because once Diana's memory becomes attached to Princess Charlotte's future, the story stops being about the past alone. It begins to touch the monarchy's next chapter, the careful image being built around William and Catherine's children, and the quiet understanding that every symbol given to the younger generation carries meaning far beyond the family itself. According to royal commentators, this is why the alleged tiara moment has drawn such intense discussion. A child in the direct line of succession is not simply being linked to a beloved grandmother. She is being placed, symbolically, within a much wider conversation about what kind of monarchy the public wants to see in the years ahead. Is it a monarchy that protects itself through silence, or one that survives by allowing emotional truth to remain visible? That is a delicate question, and it is one Buckingham Palace would almost certainly prefer to handle with great caution. For Prince William, the situation would be especially sensitive. The Prince of Wales has spent much of his adult life balancing two responsibilities that do not always move easily together. On one side, he is Diana's son, shaped by the loss of a mother whose memory still belongs deeply to the public. On the other, he is the future king, expected to protect the crown from unnecessary division, even when the emotions involved are personal. So if Princess Anne's reported gesture was intended to honor Diana through Charlotte, it may have placed William in a position where private feeling and institutional discipline quietly collided. That is where the story becomes more complicated. Some royal watchers believe William would understand the emotional force behind such a tribute better than anyone. He knows how powerfully Diana's name still resonates with older viewers, with people who watched her grow from a young bride into one of the most recognized women in the world. He knows that many people still see her compassion as one of the monarchy's most human qualities. Yet he also knows that reviving Diana's story too sharply can reopen wounds that the royal household has spent decades trying to soften. And this is where Catherine's role becomes important. even if she is not necessarily at the center of the alleged confrontation. Catherine, Princess of Wales, has often been viewed by the public as a bridge between tradition and modern warmth. Her image is careful, composed, maternal, and steady. She has never tried to imitate Diana, but comparisons have always followed her, especially in the way she carries public affection without appearing to chase it. If Charlotte were publicly or symbolically connected to Diana's legacy, Catherine would become part of that emotional line too, whether she asked for it or not. That creates a powerful but difficult implication. On the surface, the idea of Charlotte inheriting a symbol of Diana's compassion may seem tender and natural. But inside royal life, tenderness can quickly become strategy. A young princess connected to Diana's memory could strengthen the Wales family's public image, reminding people of continuity, empathy, and generational renewal. But it could also intensify comparisons that are already uncomfortable for the wider household. And if Queen Camilla is mentioned in connection with resistance to that symbolism, the story immediately enters far more sensitive territory. Because Camilla's position has always depended on time, patience, and public acceptance. Her journey from one of the most criticized figures in modern royal history to queen consort, and then queen, has been one of the monarchy's most carefully managed image transformations. Many supporters argue that she has shown loyalty to King Charles III and taken on her duties with quiet consistency. But others, especially those with strong memories of Diana, have never fully separated Camilla's present role from the painful history that came before it. That is why any claim involving Camilla's alleged discomfort over Diana-related symbolism carries such emotional weight. It does not need to be confirmed to become powerful in public discussion, because the public already understands the history underneath it. If reports suggest that Camilla reacted strongly to a gesture involving Diana and Charlotte, many viewers instinctively read it through decades of memory, loyalty, grief, and unresolved judgment. Whether that reading is fair is another question, but it is undeniably part of the monarchy's public reality. This is also why Princess Anne's reported involvement feels so pointed, and is not usually positioned as a sentimental guardian of Diana's memory. Her relationship with Diana was often described as complex, shaped by different personalities and different ideas of duty. Yet that may be exactly why the claim has such force. If someone known for discipline and restraint is believed to be making a symbolic stand, observers begin to wonder whether the issue is not emotional excess, but institutional concern. Was Anne, as some commentators have speculated, trying to protect a memory she believed had become too controlled? Or was she simply recognizing that Diana's legacy, whether convenient or not, remains part of the monarchy's strength? There is a difference between reopening old pain and refusing to erase it. And in royal history, that difference can shape how the public interprets an entire generation. The reported pressure around Camilla's isolation, though unconfirmed, raises another layer of consequence. To demand that a sitting queen be kept away from certain discussions, ceremonies, or symbolic decisions would not be a small matter. It would suggest not only family disagreement, but a question about influence. Who has the right to shape the monarchy's emotional story? Who decides how Diana is remembered? Who controls what the next generation inherits, not legally but symbolically? Those questions matter because monarchy is built as much on perception as on protocol. The crown survives through continuity, but continuity depends on public trust. If the public believes the royal family is honoring Diana honestly through William's children, that may strengthen emotional connection with the future reign. But if people believe her memory is being managed, limited, or treated as a threat, then old doubts can return with surprising force. This is where Princess Charlotte becomes more than a young royal in a reported family moment. She becomes a symbol of what the monarchy may choose to carry forward. Through her, commentators see the possibility of Diana's softness returning to the center of royal life, not as rebellion, but as inheritance. Yet that possibility is precisely what could unsettle those who want the institution to move beyond its most painful chapters. And perhaps that is the real tension beneath the tiara. It is not only whether Charlotte should be associated with Diana's legacy. It is whether the monarchy is willing to admit that Diana's legacy was never truly outside the institution. It remained there, quietly, in William, in Harry, in public memory, and now, perhaps, in the grandchildren who have inherited not only royal titles, but the emotional weight of a story the world never forgot. Still, Section 2 cannot answer the largest question yet, because the more serious issue is not simply who felt honored or unsettled by the gesture. It is what the reported reaction revealed about power behind palace doors. If Anne's alleged decision was symbolic, then Camilla's alleged resistance may have been strategic. And once that possibility entered the conversation, the story moved beyond memory and into something far more delicate, the quiet struggle over who gets to shape the future image of the crown. That quiet struggle over the future image of the crown is what makes the reported dispute so difficult to dismiss as a passing family disagreement. In royal life, influence is rarely measured only by who speaks the loudest. It is measured by who shapes the symbols, who controls the public story, and who quietly decides which memories are allowed to remain close to the throne. And if the claims surrounding Princess Anne are being interpreted correctly by royal watchers, then her alleged decision was not simply about honoring Princess Charlotte. It may have been about placing Diana's legacy where it could no longer be treated as a distant chapter from the past. By linking that memory to the Wales children, especially to Charlotte, the Princess Royal would be drawing Diana's story into the monarchy's future rather than leaving it behind as a painful memory from another era. That distinction matters, because for decades, the royal household has had to live with two competing truths. The institution survived Diana's death, but it never fully escaped the emotional force of her memory. The monarchy moved forward, but the public did not forget what Diana represented. And now, as William and Catherine's children become more visible, that memory naturally begins to return in a different form. Not through interviews, scandal, or grief, but through inheritance. This is where the reported tiara symbolism becomes more strategic than sentimental. A tiara connected to Diana, whether through direct ownership, family association, or public meaning, would not only remind people of the late princess. It would suggest that her qualities still have a place in the royal line. Compassion, accessibility, emotional intelligence, a kind of public warmth that cannot be created by palace planning alone. But those same qualities can also be uncomfortable for an institution that values control. Royal commentators have often noted that the monarchy depends on emotional connection, but fears emotional disorder. It needs the public to care, yet it also needs the public not to question too deeply. Diana was powerful because she made people feel personally connected to the crown, but that same connection sometimes challenged the palace's preferred distance. So when her legacy is brought forward again, even through a young princess, it raises the old dilemma. Can the monarchy use Diana's emotional power without reopening the parts of the story it would rather leave untouched? For King Charles III, that question would be especially delicate. The king has spent years trying to stabilize both his personal image and the institution he now leads. His reign has already unfolded under intense scrutiny, shaped by questions of health, transition, generational change, and public confidence. Any renewed focus on Diana, particularly if it appears to create tension around Queen Camilla, risks pulling Charles back into a story he has spent much of his public life trying to move beyond. Yet the king cannot simply ignore Diana's place in royal history either. She is the mother of his sons. She is the grandmother of the Wales children. She remains central to the emotional identity of millions of royal viewers around the world. To treat her memory too cautiously could appear cold. To revive it too strongly could appear disruptive. That is the narrow path the monarchy must walk, and it may explain why the reported situation feels so charged behind the scenes. And, however, has always been viewed differently from Charles. She does not carry the same public history with Diana. She does not have the same need to defend her past. That may be why some observers believe the Princess Royal could act in a way others could not. If she truly wanted to protect Diana's symbolic place in the family, she could do it from a position of duty rather than personal guilt, and from loyalty to the monarchy rather than rebellion against it. But was that loyalty directed toward the king's current reign, or toward William's future one? That is the question that brings the story closer to the center of power. The Prince of Wales represents the next era of the British monarchy. Everything around him is already being read as preparation, even when the palace says nothing. His public role, Catherine's image, the careful visibility of Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, all of it is watched as a preview of what the crown may become. So if Anne's reported move strengthened the Diana connection around William's family, it may also have strengthened the emotional foundation of his future reign. And that could create tension with Camilla's position, not necessarily because of personal rivalry, but because symbols compete. A monarchy cannot place every memory at the center at once. If Diana's legacy becomes more visible through Charlotte, Camilla's carefully built acceptance may be forced into comparison again. If the Wales family becomes the emotional bridge to the public, the king and queen's generation may begin to look more transitional. And if that interpretation takes hold, then the dispute is not only about who is honored, it is about which royal story the public is being invited to believe. This is why the reported demand for Camilla's isolation, if accurate, would mark such a serious escalation. Isolation in a royal context does not always mean punishment in the ordinary sense. It can mean distance from influence, distance from decision-making, distance from symbolic moments where the future image of the monarchy is being shaped. And if and believe that certain influences were complicating the monarchy's ability to honor Diana honestly, then her alleged demand would be less about revenge and more about control of the narrative. Still, Buckingham Palace has not publicly confirmed any such internal action. It remains unverified, and it must be treated carefully. But the power of the claim lies in the fact that it feels connected to visible tensions the public already understands. Diana's memory remains beloved. Camilla's role remains sensitive for some viewers. William's future reign is approaching in the public imagination. Charlotte's presence carries generational meaning, and Anne's reputation gives any reported intervention a sense of seriousness. The deeper implication is that the monarchy may be entering a phase where old wounds are no longer only old wounds. They are becoming part of the succession story. What happened in the past is now being measured against what the institution wants to become. And that means every decision involving Diana, Camilla, William, Catherine, or the children can be read as part of a larger question. Is the royal family protecting history, managing history, or quietly rewriting it? By the end of this stage, the tiara was no longer just a glittering symbol in a reported ceremony. It had become a test of memory, loyalty, and power. It asked whether Diana's legacy could be carried forward without threatening the people who came after her. It asked whether Charlotte could represent healing without becoming part of a deeper family divide. And it raised one final, more dangerous possibility. Because if Princess Anne understood the emotional consequences of this gesture before anyone else did, then her reported move may not have been spontaneous at all. It may have been the first step in a much more calculated attempt to change the balance inside the royal household. And to understand why that possibility matters, we have to look at the one development that reportedly turned a symbolic tribute into a direct confrontation. The development that reportedly changed the direction of a story was not the tiara itself, but the reaction it appeared to provoke. Because in royal life, a symbol can be managed, softened, or quietly explained away. A reaction is different. A reaction reveals pressure. It shows where the sensitive ground lies. And according to the claims now being discussed by royal commentators, Princess Anne's alleged tribute to Charlotte may have exposed a tension that had been carefully contained for years. At first, the palace would have had every reason to treat the matter as a private family issue. A young princess, a symbolic gesture, a difficult memory, and several senior royals with different emotional histories could all be framed as something personal rather than institutional. That would be the safest interpretation. It would allow Buckingham Palace to avoid turning a family moment into a public argument about Diana, Camilla, and the future of the crown. But the difficulty with this story is that once Queen Camilla's alleged opposition became part of the conversation, the private meaning could no longer be separated from the public one. Some observers have speculated that Camilla's reported resistance was not simply about a tiara or a tribute. It may have been about what that tribute represented. The return of Diana's emotional authority at a time when the monarchy is trying to project calm continuity. For years, Camilla's public role has depended on stability. She has been presented as dependable, unshowy, and loyal to the king. That image requires the public to see her not through the sharpest memories of the past, but through the softer lens of service in the present. But Diana's legacy does not behave like an old headline. It returns whenever the monarchy speaks about compassion. It returns whenever William speaks about his mother. It returns whenever Catherine is compared to the women who came before her. And it returns even more strongly when Princess Charlotte is imagined as part of that emotional inheritance. That is why Anne's reported gesture, if accurate, may have placed Camilla in an impossible position. To oppose it too openly could appear defensive. To accept it without question could allow Diana's presence to move closer to the center of royal symbolism again. That is the kind of pressure palace advisors understand very well. The royal household is not only protecting people, it is protecting narratives. Every generation of the monarchy needs a story the public can believe in. King Charles III's story has been duty after waiting, patience after controversy, and stability after transition. William's story is different. His is about modern fatherhood, restraint, emotional inheritance, and the promise of a monarchy that feels more connected to ordinary families. Diana belongs naturally to that second story, and that may be why her symbolic return through Charlotte feels so consequential. For the Prince of Wales, the reported situation would not only be emotional, but strategic. William cannot allow his mother's legacy to be used carelessly, yet he also cannot deny that it remains one of the strongest emotional bridges between his family and the public. If Anne's alleged move strengthened that bridge, he would have to consider what it meant for his children, for Catherine, and for his own future reign. Was Charlotte being honored, or was she being pulled into a battle over memory before she was old enough to understand its weight? That is one of the most uncomfortable questions in this story. Royal children are often protected by silence, but they are also surrounded by symbolism from the moment they are born. Their names, appearances, balcony positions, family photographs, and public outings are all read as signs of continuity. Charlotte, in particular, already occupies a rare position. She is not the heir, but she is close enough to the center of the monarchy to carry meaning. She represents the future without bearing the heaviest burden of succession. That makes her a powerful figure in the emotional imagination of royal watchers. And if Diana's memory is attached to her too strongly, the public may begin to see Charlotte not only as William and Catherine's daughter, but as the young royal who carries forward a softer, more compassionate strand of the Windsor story. For supporters, that would be moving. For the institution, it could be useful. But for those who fear old wounds being reopened, it could also be risky. Because the stronger Charlotte's connection to Diana becomes, the harder it is for the monarchy to keep Diana's story safely behind glass. This may explain why the reported demand involving Camilla's isolation has drawn so much attention. The word itself is severe, and because Buckingham Palace has not publicly confirmed such a development, it must be treated as an allegation rather than established fact. But as a piece of royal commentary, it speaks to a larger possibility that some inside the family may believe certain figures should be kept away from decisions involving Diana's legacy and the Wales children's future image. If that interpretation is correct, the issue would no longer be about emotion alone. It would become a question of access. Who is allowed to influence the symbols surrounding the next generation? Who is trusted to handle Diana's memory without turning it into a source of division? And who, inside the palace, has the authority to say that one royal figure's presence has become too complicated for the future the monarchy is trying to build? For King Charles, this would be an extremely delicate line to walk. The king's loyalty to Camilla is central to his personal life and public reign. Yet his responsibility to the crown requires him to think beyond personal loyalty. If Anne's reported concerns were framed as institutional rather than emotional, Charles would be forced to consider not simply what was fair to his wife, but what was safest for the monarchy. That is a painful distinction, and it is one monarchs throughout history have had to confront. The crown often demands decisions the family would rather avoid. The public perception risk is equally serious. If royal watchers believe and was defending Diana's legacy, she may be seen as courageous, principled, and protective of Charlotte. If others believe she overstepped, they may see the gesture as disruptive, even unfair to a child and damaging to a family still trying to present unity. Both interpretations can exist at the same time, and that is what makes the story so powerful for discussion. Was this an act of loyalty to Diana, or an unnecessary reopening of history? Was it about protecting the future, or about refusing to release the past? The palace's challenge, according to commentators, would be to prevent that debate from hardening into a larger public divide. Diana remains deeply beloved, but the monarchy cannot afford to appear trapped by her absence. Camilla has achieved a measure of public acceptance, but that acceptance can still be tested when old memories return. William and Catherine offer a hopeful future image, But even that image becomes more complicated if their children are drawn into emotional symbolism too early. By this point, the reported tiara moment had become something far larger than the object itself. It had become a mirror reflecting every unresolved question the modern monarchy carries: how to honor the dead without wounding the living, how to protect children while preparing them for duty, how to respect a queen while acknowledging the woman whose memory still commands extraordinary affection. And that is why Section 5 must look beyond the alleged confrontation itself. Because the real consequence was not only who stood on which side of the reported dispute, it was what the dispute revealed about the monarchy's future, and whether Diana's legacy is now becoming not a memory from the past, but one of the defining forces shaping what comes next. And if Diana's legacy is now being treated as one of the forces shaping what comes next, then this reported dispute becomes much more than a story about one tiara, one ceremony, or one moment of family tension. It becomes a question about the emotional future of the monarchy itself, because every generation of the House of Windsor must decide what it carries forward, what it softens, and what it leaves behind. For years, the royal family has tried to present continuity as its greatest strength. The crown survives because it does not react to every storm, does not answer every accusation, and does not allow private pain to become the center of public life. That silence has often protected the institution. But silence can also leave questions unresolved, especially when the public feels that a story has never been fully settled. Diana remains one of those stories. Her memory is not simply nostalgic. It is active, emotional, and still capable of changing how people see the royals who came after her. That is why Princess Anne's reported gesture carries such weight in the public imagination. If the Princess Royal did intend to connect Charlotte with Diana's compassion, then the meaning was not only personal. It suggested that the monarchy's future may need more than protocol and tradition. It may need emotional honesty. It may need visible tenderness. It may need reminders that royal duty is not only about ceremony, but about the public believing that the people behind the title still understand grief, loyalty, service, and love. For Charlotte, the long-term significance is delicate. She is too young to be made into a public symbol in the way adults often imagine, and any responsible monarchy would understand the need to protect her childhood. But royal history has always placed meaning on young shoulders long before the children themselves can choose it. The public sees echoes, patterns, and possibilities. In Charlotte, some see the quiet dignity of Catherine. Others see glimpses of William's seriousness. And now, through this reported tiara story, some may begin to see a line reaching back to Diana. That line can be beautiful, but it can also be heavy. Because to inherit Diana's legacy is not simply to inherit affection. It is to inherit expectation. The public does not only remember Diana as glamorous or beloved. They remember her as someone who changed the emotional language of the monarchy. She touched people. She broke distance. She made royal life feel more human, and that is precisely why her memory remains so powerful. If Charlotte is ever viewed as carrying even a small part of that legacy, then the monarchy will have to treat that symbolism with care, not as decoration, but as responsibility. For William, that responsibility may be even greater. The future king has always had to live with the fact that his mother belongs partly to the public. His grief was private, but her story became global. His children are now growing up inside the same institution that shaped and wounded Diana's life, and that creates a difficult emotional inheritance. If Anne's reported action was meant to protect that inheritance, then it may also have been a warning. The next generation must not be allowed to receive only a polished version of the past. Catherine's place in this meaning is equally important. She has become, for many viewers, the figure through whom stability and warmth can coexist. She represents a future queen who understands discipline, but also family. If Charlotte is linked symbolically to Diana, then Catherine becomes the guardian of that connection in everyday life, not through grand speeches, but through how she raises her daughter, how she protects her, and how she allows the public to see enough without giving too much away. That balance may become one of the quiet tests of the Wales family's future image. And then there is Camilla. The reported demand for her isolation, while unconfirmed, remains the sharpest and most controversial part of the story because it raises the question no palace statement can easily answer. Can the monarchy fully honor Diana's memory while Camilla remains central to the king's reign? For some people, the answer is yes. They see time, duty, and service as enough to allow the institution to move forward. For others, the emotional history is too deep, and any strong return of Diana's symbolism naturally places Camilla under renewed scrutiny. That is the difficult reality of royal life. The crown may move forward, but the public carries memory differently. Institutions think in decades. Families think in wounds. Viewers think in moments they never forgot. A wedding dress, a hospital visit, a lonely interview, two young princes walking behind a coffin. These images do not disappear because a new reign begins. They remain beneath the surface, waiting for the right symbol to bring them back. So perhaps the real meaning of this story is not whether every reported detail is accurate. Buckingham Palace has not publicly confirmed the alleged ceremony, the alleged confrontation, or any internal isolation of Queen Camilla. The real meaning lies in why the story feels believable enough to spark discussion. It touches something unresolved. It speaks to the sense that the monarchy is still negotiating with its own emotional history, even as it prepares for a future led by William, Catherine, and eventually their children. If Anne's reported move was courageous, then it was courageous because it placed memory above convenience. If it was reckless, then it was reckless because it risked drawing a young princess into a conflict she did not create. Both interpretations can exist together, and that is what makes the story so compelling. Royal life is rarely simple enough for one clean answer. It is made of duty and feeling, loyalty and pain, history and survival. What may matter most is that Charlotte's name has now been placed inside a much larger conversation about legacy. Not succession in a legal sense, but inheritance in the emotional sense. What does the next generation receive from the past? A crown, a title, a set of rules, or also the unfinished stories, the unresolved loyalties, and the public memories that still shape the meaning of royal duty? And while this reported chapter may seem to settle around Diana and Camilla and Charlotte, it also points toward a wider shift inside the House of Windsor. The monarchy is no longer judged only by how well it preserves tradition. It is judged by how honestly it handles memory, how carefully it protects its younger generation, and how convincingly it prepares the public for the reign still to come. Because as this question begins to settle, another royal development is already drawing attention, and it may reveal even more about the pressure now surrounding the crown.